就任后首次访华，他表示期待共建中马命运共同体。关注脱贫事业，他认为中国脱贫成就史无前例。赞赏全球文明倡议，他表示各国同属一个人类大家庭。反对科技问题政治化，他认为科技进步不是威胁，更不是控制他人的手段。马来西亚总理安瓦尔·易卜拉欣访华期间接受高端访谈专访，敬请收看。
关注国际焦点，洞察世界风云。大家好，欢迎来到本期的高端访谈，我是邹韵。今天我们要对话的嘉宾是马来西亚总理安瓦尔·易卜拉欣。去年11月上任后，他在今年春暖花开的季节开启了首次访华之旅。此次中国之行，安瓦尔总理的主要收获有哪些？他为何会用惊喜来形容与习主席的会见？作为熟读《论语》的儒家思想爱好者，他对于中马两国的人文交流有着怎样的期待？今年是中马全面战略伙伴关系建立10周年，而明年将迎来两国建交50周年。安瓦尔总理对于中马两国合作的未来又有哪些展望呢？今天我们一起在对话中寻找答案。
Your Excellency Prime Minister, thank you so much for joining us today. Well, this is actually your very first time to visit China since taking office as Prime Minister, and your very busy and demanding schedule is going to be wrapped up very soon. So to start with, share with us about the biggest takeaway as well as the major outcome of your visit this time.
I think was the meeting with President Xi Jinping, because it was not just a normal diplomatic encounter talking about trade or investment, but we discussed quite a number of issues relating to our philosophy, our views of the world, issues of values, issue of civilization. We converse as trusted friends. But of course we did touch on specific issues of what we expect from China and vice versa, the issue of shared future, the issue of trade, investments, training, and also the potential of collaboration between these two countries. But what is to me significant is we expanded that to issues, for example, when I said about poverty alleviation. The President made reference to that. You see, because since I took over for the last 4 months, I became very committed to the issue of poverty eradication. The success in China is unprecedented. So I said, we can share. So the President was very forthcoming in that field to ensure that we benefit from the experience in China. It's not easy. Of course, it's a bigger country, you have to deal with much complex problems. Overall, I've sensed that the President showed so much understanding and passion for these sort of relations, and so much respect, which I feel a bit surprised.
What do you mean by you're surprised? Does it mean that it is beyond your expectations,
Yes.
even though the expectations are actually very high there?
Yeah, because President Xi Jinping is a very prominent leader in the world, and leading, one of the leading economies and, power. But he showed so much deference and, to discuss as equals. And I find it very, I should say, touching, and I value that sort of friendship. But then, secondly, of course, we have seen, because of this new wave, this enthusiasm between Malaysia and China, is reflected to the business community. So we find it's again unprecedented for so many leading captains of industry.
That's actually something I'm really curious about, because economic and trade cooperation has been one of the major highlights between the bilateral relations, and China has remained the largest trade partner for Malaysia since 2009. You just mentioned that this time you're not only with Chinese leaders, but also many business leaders and also delegates here. Some MOUs were signed as a kind of outcome. Yeah. So looking ahead, What are some of the new opportunities and the most promising areas of cooperation in this regard?
The number one in this industry, which is billions of dollars worth, would sit down in a group, 50 of them, to see me discuss and commit to invest.
You just talk about the very impressive interactions that you had this time with Chinese President Xi Jinping. So can you give us a little bit more specific details about anything really stand up in your memory, in your recollection this time during your meetings with President?
I started off by saying his passion for reform, for his conduct, even in domestic affairs like poverty issues, his concern for the general welfare of the people, and then the various initiatives, as I said, BRI, and then the security concerns and the civilizational initiative. But his response was remarkable. He said, well, Anwar, you are also a student of Confucius. You seem to understand Chinese history. And I see your passion, commitment to eradicate poverty in your country. And you wrote in the Asian Renaissance, the book. So I said, well, this is, of course, commendable. So we got the chemistry right from the beginning.
Mr. Prime Minister, you've been to China before. What are some of the major changes that really impressed you about the country's development this time?
Well, the development is phenomenal. As you know that, I should say, mind-boggling to get to understand.
It is overwhelming in a way, right?
To understand.
For instance, anything that really surprised you or shocked you in a way? I don't know.
You know, the transformation of the country is the modern economy, and at the same time having this strong effort to alleviate poverty, and then to enter into new technology. I mean, AI, telecommunications, semiconductor issues which are relatively newer to China. I must confess that, for example, in semiconductor, although it's a small player, we were earlier. But you have surpassed us triple times. Yes. So I can notice it. And of course, the infrastructure is just phenomenal. No country in the world could do this.
Mr. Prime Minister, when you were sworn in as Prime Minister last November, you told journalists that the role of China is pivotal. And you also said in terms of bilateral relations, you won't leave this as it is. It needs to be further enhanced. So having said that, what kind of tone do you think your trip this time has set for the future of bilateral relations? And what vision do you have for even fostering this closer ties moving forward?
Because I want to make it clear that we are fiercely independent, that we decide what is best for our country. China is an important neighbor, is a major trading partner, is a major investor into Malaysia. We look at history. In my exchanges with the President JP, you'll be surprised. We talk about Zheng He's expedition, we talked about Confucius. So, and when I wrote to him, thanking him for the congratulatory note, I quoted from Confucius, and his reply yesterday was this. He quoted one of the Confucius sayings that finally leaders or we in having responsibility need to do what is right.
What was that quote from Confucius?
From Confucius. Yeah.
What needs to be?
Do what is ultimately right, because many considerations. There are many other considerations you should have, but finally, how do you decide? You decide what is right. So we went along that way. So if you ask me about our relations, of course, we want to have good relations with our neighbors. ASEAN is pivotal. At the same time, United States or Europe. But China has a special place because it's proximity and it's a long history. And there's no history of antagonism or aggression or the sort, you see. So that's why I said right from the first day of after swearing in, and now coming to China, and I see the warmth, the friendship, just proved what I had believed to be true, because the majority of Malaysia are Muslims, So I take the trouble to meet up with the Muslim leaders from China, the Chinese Islamic Association, go to the mosque and pray with them, and they joining us for the iftar or the breakfast after fasting, to show that, you know, how accommodating Chinese authorities are, and they too is living in a multicultural country. It augurs well for both countries.
中国和马来西亚的友谊源远流长，两国关系发展一直走在地区国家前列。今年是“一带一路”倡议10周年，作为最早响应“一带一路”倡议的国家之一，马来西亚在共建“一带一路”的过程中收获了丰硕成果。坐落于马来西亚东海湾彭亨州首府关丹的马中关丹产业园，是“一带一路”规划重大项目和跨境国际产能合作示范基地。2013年正式开园以来，马中关丹产业园与中马钦州产业园区联动发展，创造了两国双园模式下两国经济合作创新的典范。设计全长600多公里的马东铁路被视为连通马来西亚东西海岸的陆上桥梁，也是中马共建“一带一路”的标志性项目。通车后将改变东海岸的吉兰丹州到西海岸的雪兰莪州没有铁路通达的现状，直接惠及当地民生。近几年，中马双边贸易蓬勃发展，中国连续14年成为马来西亚最大贸易伙伴。多年来，中马两国患难与共，携手并进。马来西亚谚语“切水不断”正是对两国友好关系的生动写照。
Well, talking about the Belt and Road Initiative, actually Malaysia was among the earliest countries to support this initiative. And thanks to the BRI, we've been able to see not only the flourish of some mega projects, including the East Coast Rail Link, the two countries' Twin Parks project, but also the Malaysian Durang gaining increasing popularity among Chinese consumers, being me, one of them. So, Mr. Prime Minister, at the Boao Forum for Asia, you stressed that the momentum of this initiative need to be regained. What do you mean by that? And how do you think the development synergies can be better enhanced between the two countries under this initiative?
We need to transcend beyond what has been achieved. I mentioned in my speech earlier last month about the Asian Monetary Fund, or Asian Common Currency of a sort, which the President has responded very positively. That is, of course, a next stage of collaboration. Otherwise, it is a joint effort in sharing research, agriculture, in the science, and in digital technology and economy, which both of us agree.
Mr. Prime Minister, when you spoke at the Boao Forum for Asia, you touched upon the competition on science and technology, and you said, quote, "The rivalry ahead can be either a productive or destructive turn." And how do you see the rising tide of politicization on the competition of science and technology among some countries?
You see, why I referred to that statement in the Boao conference is because we see the contribution of any country in science, technology, in digital economy, something productive. And we say, let us share. I don't see this as a threat, as a competition, or as a new attempt to control. But that seems to be the position of some countries. So unfortunately, as I see it, whatever is achieved here is beneficial to the region. The apps, whatever. If there are excesses of concern, then we should take it up. Specifically, problems among the users, or the apps, they can be problematic, but they cannot be used to stifle growth or to consider any innovation as a threat.
As the 6th largest exporter of semiconductor, how do you see the future of bilateral relations on that front?
Malaysia is one of the few countries that have some baseline in terms of semiconductor production. But now I hear that some major Chinese companies are investing to it and expanding it, which is, to my mind, an evidence that we can collaborate together.
Let's talk about the China-ASEAN cooperation. Well, as a matter of fact, Malaysia was the very first ASEAN country that invited China to have dialogue with the bloc and also hold China-ASEAN summit. With both sides now accelerating the negotiation of the 3.0 version of free trade agreement, what role do you think Malaysia could play in this process?
We have been quite forthcoming in this. Because it's a very pragmatic consideration. We have long tradition relations with the United States and Europe and Australia and India. But China is an important neighbor, and I think they've proven in the last few decades, they've been very forthcoming, very helpful, and very engaging. Even some more controversial issues, even like the South China Sea. We don't see a very combative, arrogant, demanding China. We see them as, asking us to continue the dialogue. And that's why our position, and more so under my administration, we should, as I say, independently decide what is best for us. And what is best for us is to be good with our neighbors.
The ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific was launched with a focus on ASEAN centrality. Is Malaysia concerned about some geopolitical fluctuations in the Asia-Pacific region? And how do you think China and Malaysia could work together to promote regional peace and stability?
Yeah, the formative period of ASEAN was to emphasize the need of independence, the need of neutrality, particularly during the Cold War period, to avoid the tension. And that general position continues. We don't want the region to be a base for military competition. That position has been quite consistent, although we remain friendly to all countries. That is why when the issue of AUKUS rose, our position is, to express concern. Although the explanation was given, the Australians took a lot of effort to try and convince us, and we appreciate that. But we do, on the basis of our consistent position, since the beginning, not to allow for a situation to aggravate into a military tension, and to be deemed or seen to be provocative. So that's why Malaysia took a tougher line on this, because it is not consistent. We worry it's not consistent with the issue of neutrality from the beginning, engaging with all, and not to allow ASEAN to be engrossed in this sort of unnecessary provocations. So in fact, we have said repeatedly, it's the interest of the international community for an amicable resolution to the tension between China and the United States, and not to see China unnecessarily as a threat. It's not a threat to Malaysia. I don't know how it is to other countries. You see? Of course, they take up issue of Taiwan. As far as our policy is concerned, our policy is one China policy.
Mm-hmm. It's a domestic issue.
Yeah, domestic issue.
Taiwan's
yes.
part of China.
But as far as we're concerned, it's one China. We can express some views here and there, but then we cannot, as you say, question the integrity of these nations. That's been our policy, and we've been consistent at that.
How do you understand the rising trend of anti-globalization and anti-multilateralism?
We always call for regional cooperation. Here we have RCEP, for example, right. And we have APEC. So we are all in it, you see, because we are in a globalized world, and for small trading nations like Malaysia, we should benefit from engaging with all countries. We believe in engagement, and multilateralism.
As you just mentioned, that now the world is going through many unprecedented challenges. This is a time we need critical solutions. We need various approaches and also, of course, more wisdom. So with that context, how do you see the significance of the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, as well as the Global Civilization Initiative proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping?
Well, that encapsulates the thinking which is beyond just security or economics, because you are dealing with humanity. And therefore, the issue of dialogue, civilization dialogue, of respect is important. And that is why I think I consider that significant, because it augurs well for nations and the spirit to deal with problems in the future. You see, we, particularly those in politics, become so pragmatic and so materialistic, and that they consider only the present issues. But the president, and I believe in our Madani concept too, talks about values, cultures, civilizations. Because Malaysia is a multiracial, multireligious country. The complexities in China is also known. So only through respecting others, understanding their civilization and cultures and contribution, can you forge this new understanding, new compassion that leaders lack. You see, we lack compassion. So we talk in terms of strict, rigid, ideological or racial tones. And I think we should build on this, the initiative of the president. And I have told him, and he said, very consistent with the Madani concept.
Mm-hmm. Is the value or the kind of philosophy you just mentioned, does that kind of echo with your philosophy and value, which were written in Chinese, 我们都是一家人, we're all one family, and we heard that Chinese artwork of calligraphy used to hang on the wall of your office. So what kind of message do you get from that Chinese expressions?
You see, when I said that, and I tried writing in Chinese, 我们都是一家人, I mean, actually, we are talking about humanity, and it's more relevant also in Malaysia and of course in the global stage, because if we consider ourselves apart, then we only consider the rest as the other, and therefore there will become this clash. But if you consider us in this big family, in the nation and family of nations, then I think there's less room for animosity and conflict and antagonisms.
You mentioned about Confucianism. Actually, we all know you have a really deep understanding about Confucianism. And back in 1994, when you visited China, you actually paid a visit to the temple of Confucius, right? Actually, by the way, I'm from Shandong, so that was my hometown. Not Chifu, but yeah, I'm from Shandong. Yeah. So how has the value or the core values of Confucianism has influenced and inspired you all those years?
Well, he's a great sage, and looking at his writings, Zunyi, the Analects, you find that there's so much wisdom that we need to acquire. I benefit immensely to understand the other. And I think generally this is also what is talked about, the Global Civilization Initiative. And that, you know, you engage, you respect their differences, you understand, and finally the too many similarities.
Right.
Yeah. All civilizations condemn injustices, racism, religious bigotry, arrogance of power, corruption.
So it is about seeking commonality while respecting the differences of each other. Prime Minister Anwar, we heard that tourism was actually one of the issues that are high on your agenda this time in China. Well, Malaysia has always been one of the most popular holiday destinations among Chinese tourists. And now with international travel coming gradually back on track, you know, Malaysia could be once again a very hot spot for Chinese travelers. So as the Prime Minister now, how would you recommend your country to our Chinese viewers and also Chinese visitors?
Well, other than durian.
Yes, what are some of the untapped attractions maybe that you think are interesting to our viewers here?
Yeah, we need to promote Malaysia because it has I mean, it's a beautiful country,
It is beautiful, very diversified. I've been there.
Very diversified, you're right. And then the attraction is not only one area around Kuala Lumpur, for example. It is the East Coast, it is in Sabah, it is in Sarawak, it is the cave. So now, when China reopened, the number of Chinese tourists have increased threefold.
When you see that, I saw the smile on your face. That was really something positive and inspiring, right?
Yes, of course. Because I come from Penang, which is actually a tourist island. So it is important for the economy of the country. And then I used to present one constituency which is, full of hotels in the seabed near about 1.5 hours out of Kuala Lumpur.
Let's talk about the star ambassadors between the friendship of two countries, the giant pandas, because recently some videos released by Malaysian National Zoo about those pandas playing with their keepers has really went viral online. Those pandas, they were called Yi and Shengyi, with a literal translation of friendship and enhancing friendship.
Yes.
They were very well liked among Malaysian citizens, and also they were born in Malaysia and be returning to China soon. So, Mr. Prime Minister, do you personally love those giant pandas, and also what kind of impact do you think they have played in enhancing the time-honored friendship between the two countries?
But to be honest, my grandchildren know more about these pandas than me.
Do they love that?
Yes. They have been there, they've been to the zoo, they've been visited, but I must apologize, I have not seen them. But that has gone viral too in the country. And I think when we decide to send back, it will be very emotional departure. I think people will be very sad. But,
heartbroken moment for our grandkids, huh? Economic development has been one of the priorities for your government. And Malaysia is now facing with some economic challenges domestically, which includes the rising inflation, falling currency, as well as the losses brought by the floods. So the devils are in the details, right, Mr. Prime Minister? So what are the specific plans that do you have for tackling those challenges?
You see, Malaysia used to do relatively better in the 90s.
Right.
I wouldn't say perfect, because I know poverty was there, corruption was there, but relatively better in terms of growth. Under East Asia, that's called East Asian economic miracle those days, although I don't think that is a fair picture to paint, because there are some problems. The problem with international agencies, when they get excited, they go praise sky high, that can lull people into complacency. But we have slided downwards for decades after the 97-98 crisis, and it was a problem of political instability for some years. Now we are back on track. So the issue, and I have focused on proper good governance and rid the country of that image of corruption. So we have to act very tough against this, because that alone will encourage investors. When I met the investors, one of the issues is they think that there's stability and there's an attempt by the government to ease the manner we conduct business affairs. And that by itself will help. Then they will ask us for the clarity in policies. So I talk about green or climate related policy or business, and then food security. Then we talk about digital economy. But on our part, then the infrastructure has to be improved. ECRL is, of course, a major development project under BRI, but the ports, the MRT and the LRT, all these are going to be back on track.
What are some of the key messages you think you've got from talking and meeting with Chinese leaders, with business delegates, as you mentioned, give you the confidence to foster this closer tie here with China?
I think I've seen responsible leadership with a clear vision, clarity in what they would like to achieve. And then to understand that in a global community, to work with friends in particular, to make sure that we, together, we succeed and excel. But what is, again, I said earlier, unique about the leadership and my experience talking to them and reading about it, is that it is not just political or economic imperative. It is society and humanity.
Right.
That's why we talk about the civilization initiative, to understand, respect each other, and finally we are human beings.
Mr. Prime Minister, it was a great pleasure and honor talking to you, and many thanks for sharing all those very insightful views and experiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
在刚刚结束的专访当中，安瓦尔总理对于本国发展的决心、中马友谊的珍视和全球局势的思考，让我们印象深刻。谈到中国在区域和国际事务中发挥的作用，他表示看到的是一个乐于帮助、主动沟通、积极合作的中国。谈到互利共赢，他期待看到中马两国关系在现有成就的基础上更上一层楼。感谢您收看本期的高端访谈，我是邹韵，我们下期再会。